Oh, actually, you know what? I realize I probably should put my mic in front of me if I'm going to say hello. We are, this is attempt number 2 today. I'm going to wait for some feedback from David on my team, see if we're actually streaming live. Today is Wednesday, December 28th. It is a few minutes after 12:30 p.m. Eastern time. And let me check all of my software here and see if we are live. It's always, we always live a little dangerously here. And we are live on both. All right, look at that. It took 2 attempts today rather than, singly one. All right, today is the day we're recording or streaming live for show 233. We are, again, Wednesday, December 28th. It is right here between Christmas. Christmas was a few days ago, and we have New Year's here in a few days. So we're in that weird in-between time for all of us. Now, for much of the world, this is maybe their favorite time of year because this is the holidays and people take days and weeks off. For my business owners out there, this is often some of the most challenging and struggling times of the year. And that is, and actually, I'm going to talk to Nick, our guest, about that and kind of find out from him how are the holidays doing and how is he keeping himself sane. But let's go ahead and get our guest introduced. Today, we have Nick DeClemente, founder and CEO at Elevated Integration. And I've known Nick for many years, and I was just chatting with him pre-show. I think I even knew of him before I knew him, and we'll get into that. There's some fun stories there back from the early 2000s. Some surprising stories as I was learning from Nick here before we went live. So without further ado, let me bring Nick in and let's jump into a fun conversation. Nick, how are you, sir?
I am good. How are you?
I am good. How was Christmas for you guys, you and your family?
It was great. It was good. Not too crazy. Hosted a bunch of family over the course of the weekend. I have little kids, 8 and 5, so it's mayhem Christmas morning. So it was a good time.
Do you at 8 and 5, you have to do the Santa thing where they think Santa, because Santa did come the night before. So is there the big unveiling in the morning?
Oh yeah, and then in a month of the Elf on the Shelf and the whole program. So yes, it's the whole show.
Love it. And I see some Legos over your, at least for our audience here, it'd be over your left shoulder, but on screen it's to our right. Are you a Lego fan?
I do it with my kids. My daughter and I built the Lego Death Star during COVID, during the lockdown. So I think she was, I guess, 6 at the time, or just turning 6. So we built the Lego Death Star.
That is awesome. And I want to give a shout out. We have Wes. He's actually on Team One Firefly. And on LinkedIn, he says, hey, Nick, welcome to Automation Unplugged. So
thank you, sir.
Appreciate you, Wes, tuning in. And if you are out there on LinkedIn or YouTube, don't be shy. Drop into the comments and say hello. And we're going to make sure we touch on a whole litany of controversial topics today. So don't be shy out there and let Nick know what you think about these. Nick and I, what you think about these topics. Nick, for those that may not know you, why don't you get us introduced? Tell us about the business, Elevated Integration, and your role within the business.
Yeah, so Elevated Integration, I founded it in 2012. So I'm the founder and CEO. Metro New York based, but work all over the country. I guess all over the world too, to some degree, but mostly in the U.S. obviously. I still do most of the selling and a fair amount of the engineering as part of the business. We have 8 people, um, and primarily, ultra high end luxury residential is our market.
So Paul Bachner just posted on LinkedIn.
Here we
Uh,
go.
he says that there is a scotch in the Death Star.
It's entirely possible, Paul. Thank you. Thanks, bud. It's entirely possible.
So
Those who spend time know I know that I enjoy the scotch from time to time.
got it. And by the way, Jason Sayan also stopped in and says hello, happy holidays. Appreciate that, Jason. Thanks for stopping in. Nick, lots of fun things to talk about. Actually, you and I have had the opportunity to get to know each other a bit just over the last few years, participating in the Azione board. So I've been on the board for a little bit. You've been on the board, and I've enjoyed spending that time and kind of learning about your approach to business, and you're outspoken in a great positive way. You don't mind sharing your thoughts and ideas with members of the board and with folks that are out there in the industry. And in many ways, you wear your heart and thoughts. I want to say at the end of your sleeve. I don't even know if that's the right anecdote, but you speak freely about the trials and tribulations of running a business and the trials and tribulations of participating in this industry. And it's not always roses.
It is
And
not.
one of those challenges, I'll just speak to it. Maybe folks that are tuned in will appreciate this. This time of year, the holidays can be particularly tough. And how are you staying sane? How are you staying sane? And what's it like right now for you?
It's always the wild lead up from, about the second week in November through, the Christmas holiday, where everybody's deadlines, of course, obviously magically align in the universe. And then there's always the flurry of other things, of last minute ads, of all that stuff, and everything breaks right before the holidays. That's always how it is, right? It doesn't break on Tuesday morning. It breaks, 45 minutes before the Super Bowl. So I think, when we've become accustomed to the chaos that leads up to that. I think the way that we stay sane is being prepared for it, knowing it's coming instead of this idea that it's not going to come, but also process. I think that was really something that we've worked on a lot, is being efficient and being organized and following our process to make sure that things are done well, and it minimizes the amount of chaos. But man, it there's always something. There's always something. Ice storm on Friday before Christmas in
Is
New York.
I know we'll jump into some process stuff, and Jason, who is an advisor for you guys, he's actually tuned in listening. But was this year 2022 I know we're still in the middle of it, so I can't really speak about it being past tense. Is this year a little bit better in terms of a lot of the stress and the demands on you and your team as compared to maybe years past because of some of that work that you've put into the business?
100%, 100%. I mean, I think the fact that we have a map to follow makes a huge difference in how we operate, and I think that it does as much as you possibly could do to minimize the chaos that comes around this time of year. And again, obviously, everybody's still dealing with Christmas shopping and all of the other things that go on in and around the holidays. So then you double the amount of service and double the deadlines and so on and so forth. So I think it makes a big difference.
Love it. All right. Well, we're going to definitely jump into some of that, those discussions around some of the work you've put into your business around process. But let's go back in time. Tell us, where do you come from? How'd you get into this whole crazy world?
Yeah. So, I mean, I was like a lot of young males, was a car audio guy, stuffing subwoofers into the back of, whatever shitty car that I owned at the time. So, learned about the inputs and outputs and stereos and things like that. It's actually kind of a really good way to learn the basics that you don't even learn in this, in this industry. things like crossovers and frequencies and things that kind of don't always make sense, don't get addressed because it's kind of all handled for you.
Low pass and high pass filters and all. I was
That's
one of
it.
those early 90
Yeah,
car
yeah,
audio
yeah.
guys. My audio system cost more, was worth more than my car.
100%. That's 100% true. So from there, actually, I went to art school for fine arts, and while I was there, I had to get a job. So I started working for a small electronics store in Rye in Westchester County. Um, Mostly because my girlfriend at the time, who I'm currently married to, was had a job down the street. So I said, "Oh, look at this!" I was going to visit her for lunch, and saw a stereo store, and the rest is kind of history to some degree. Worked there for about 5 years, as they were transitioning from like small electronics into the early days of CI, um, and then
What
landed
were
kind of a
what were you
big.
doing there? What was your job or role?
I mean, there was like, four of us, three of us. So it was, everything, right? So there was some
Okay.
sales, there was a lot of installation. And, I mean, there wasn't really programming at that time to some, I think we were doing a lot of Philips Prontos. Um, kind of all things integration or AV at the time, really. And then landed, I guess what would be a big job, or a big opportunity was for a company called Concierge Direct, which was really the first or one of the first MDU focused companies in CI. Um, and, as is the case sometimes, lands the biggest opportunity in the MDU space in New York City when the Plaza Hotel was turning from hotel to condos.
So
Um,
for those that may not be familiar with that early 2000s period, maybe set the stage. Like what was happening? Because I was in the middle of it, but I was on the other side of the equation. I was with Crestron in South Florida, and I was at least for a little period of time, I was the MDU guy. And so I was in the middle of this, and I even know we went head to head with you guys. I didn't realize it was you, but now I know that. But so tell our audience what was happening in New York and in South Florida and where all these buildings were going up.
Yeah, so obviously there was a construction boom, this is all pre 2008. So there was a construction boom going on of high rises. And one of the trends in New York City was taking these old landmark style, marquee properties, and turning them into really high end condos. So if you go back to 2005 and six, the Plaza had kept setting records for the most expensive residential real estate in the country, which kind of is comical now because at the time, 18, 20, 30, 50, 55 million, I think was the most expensive one. That's kind of like par for the course in New York City now. So it was a really interesting time, and it was also pre iPad, pre app, pre iPhone. So we weren't living in that world yet. So
Paul
both.
just posted a comment. He says, back when Jobs had 500K and just TVs,
Exactly. It's pretty much it. I mean, we were selling,
plasmas, right? Yeah.
Runco plasmas. So it was the opportunity was really incredible. And it was a new idea in the sense that you were concentrating ultra high net worth people. And we went out and pitched a solution, a virtual concierge effectively, which, between Ron and I never worked for any of any of the two manufacturers that were involved, which we were on the AMX side of things.
But we all
So,
sold the dream.
and we did, and it was a whole lot of vaporware, let me tell you. So,
On the
so they,
Crestron side, I remember the ISIS panels, the 12 and 15-inch, I don't
yep,
remember,
yep,
$10,000,
ten thousand
$15,000
bucks,
per touch panel.
yep.
It was craziness.
So it was, so there was no apps, right? There was no seamless. So what the conceptually was kind of a good idea. It was like, hey, you could provide this virtual concierge solution, um, and you could have vendors on the back end fulfilling requests. So part of the business was to go out and find vendors, and it was, I don't remember many of them anymore, but, Ovando, which is still the highest end florist in New York City, was the florist vendor, that kind of thing. And then the concept was we pitched, and it's not so far now, but you pitch a system to a developer. The developer buys it at some heavy discount, and our deal was, hey, no problem, but we get to sell to the homeowners and wire during construction exclusively. And it worked. And I mean, we did 25 or 30 million bucks in that building alone. And it became such a thing that, it was becoming a requirement in MDU, certainly New York City. And I know in South Florida at the time as well. So it was a big explosive win at the time, and at the same time, that company exploded the other way at the end.
Well,
Very quickly.
before we go there, what was it? Not to get too technical, but Concierge Direct, was that an AMX solution or what?
AMX Solution.
It was
AMX.
And
Yep.
so this for our audience, this was like head-to-head warfare, Crestron and AMX.
It was
And
wild.
The Crestron solution, if there's a name I remember from, back during those years, I did not work closely with them, but I know Randy Klein, former CEO at Crestron, did, and that's the Cymax guys. Does that name ring a bell? Did you guys go head to head?
Oh yeah, we did. There were a few players. There was both software guys that were involved and hardware guys, and Cymax was, to some degree, doing what we were doing in New York, doing it in Florida. And it was, warfare is a good way to put it. It was pretty wild.
Any crazy stories you can remember from that time?
Oh, I'll tell you what, we went head to head once in a meeting, and we had a developer, and developers, they like to argue. And this particular developer decided it was going to be a good idea to put AMX and Crestron in a room together with the developer and us to argue out whose solution was going to be the best solution. And after 45 minutes of Crestron's presentation, presenting their vaporware, and I kept sending questions up to Randy Klein, who was in the room, and asking him questions that I knew that he couldn't answer, or couldn't answer the way that they needed to be answered for the developer. And he got so agitated, and we're talking Looney Tunes red with steam coming out of his ears. In the middle of the meeting, he walked up to me, pointed in my face, and told me that I was effing done in this industry if I didn't shut my mouth.
In front of the customer, in front of the developer?
In front of the customer, yep. And I leaned over to him, and I think I was probably 28 at the time, and I said, if you weren't so effing ancient, I would beat the shit out of you. And that was the conversation that was my Randy Klein conversation.
So he signed you as a dealer right after, right? Is that
right after? Usually, yeah.
Is that what happened?
No, I was on his no-fly list. I remember when the following CD, I walked into the Crestron booth and was politely asked to leave. So that's a story. That was the world then. It was a very different, I was wearing suits to work every day. It was just a different thing.
What happened to Concierge? What happened to Concierge Direct? You said it blew up. It blew up? It went public and started publicly trading it.
No? Oh, I wish. Wow. No. As explosive as it was on the front end, being this new idea and this very successful, made, I think we sold, 60 or 70 million bucks over like 4 or 5 years. It then got shut down in 10 days. The owner was in Florida, came back from Florida, May 1st, 2012. By May 13th, it was shut down. And he was effectively an absentee owner. Nobody knew him. I was the face. And that was, summer of 2012 was a stressful time for me because, I got named in lawsuits and all this stuff because everybody thought I was the owner. So it took a lot of work to kind of not, fall in that bucket. And I didn't, thankfully, but, and then, very kind of by accident, founded Elevated Integration. I intended to go work for a friend of mine who owns a company in CI. Just wasn't ready to go, and had a couple of customers who said, why don't you just do our jobs? I said, hey, I'll do your job. And I figured, hey, I'll do some work for a couple of months, make some money, and then go work for somebody. And here we are 10 years later.
Tell us about the business today. Are you doing work primarily in Manhattan? Do you travel around the country to follow your clients, or what's the business
so
like?
the majority of our work is Metro New York. So everything from the Hamptons up into, Fairfield County, upstate New York, almost none across the bridge into Jersey, which is always interesting. That's because I want to make sure there's enough work for Paul Bakker over there.
Got to leave some work for Paul. So
Yep,
I'm sure he
exactly,
appreciates that.
exactly. Yeah. So, but then we travel. We'll go where our clients ask us to go. I mean, I always talk to people and say we find follow the money. I think it's gotten a little more difficult, right? I mean, airfare is so much more expensive. Post COVID. I mean, it's outrageous. So it's really tough to justify the cost. But we have a very large project in Bermuda that we've been working on for, I guess, in 2019. That's kind of coming to the close. That's a tough one. Real difficult to get your guys to go to on that one.
Yeah. Like, no, don't make me go to Bermuda, boss.
Bermuda, exactly, exactly. So, but yeah, and it's really we're a low volume. We try to be high service. Ultra high end luxury residential. And that's where we are. We're big savant, house. That's where we hang our hat.
So there's and Paul's maybe still watching. I don't know if he's still watching. What we're going to find out here real soon with this question. There's an ongoing debate, Nick, and I don't care where I go, what event. I don't even care what year it is. This debate I'm about to mention has been going on for easily 10 years plus. And but it seems as relevant today as it ever has. And that is, what is better for the consumer, a one app control solution or a multi-app approach? And I'm trying to remember who is it. Paul's on the board with us at ASEAN. And I know this
Austin,
always Austrian, this gets under his skin. So
Yep.
what's your opinion? What's best?
So but I think everybody know my opinion is a one app. I think it's a single app solution. I think that you pick your control system. We could argue that'll be the other, raging argument for all of eternity is which control system is best. Well, I mean, they're all the best and they're all the worst. So for us, it's Savant. We hang our hat on that product. We design around the flaws, and they all have them. And if you consciously design these systems, I think you can provide a really great experience, through a single app solution. I mean, here comes the comments, but
well, so I'm going to ask you to argue the other side of that. This is what you do when you're in debate class and you have to argue your point. And then, all right, now put yourself in the other side. Why would someone saying a multi-app solution is better?
Yeah, I think focused development of the hardware provider to make their app work the best with their hardware. So I think there's a reasonable argument to be had there. And I think that people will also argue that it's easier that relying on a single developer to control all of these other things as well as what their native app can do is tough. And I think I see both sides of the argument. But for me, at the end of the day, I think the consistency of operation is where it ends up lying, right? Where you can interact with all these different things in the same format, an app that looks the same. That to me is where it wins.
My opinion, and I've lived in homes with both scenarios. I think and currently I'm in a home with multiple apps, but I'm going to tell you they're both right, but it has a caveat if. So my current home, I don't have an integrator per se. That's my go-to integrator.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a Lutron app for my lighting and shades. And I have a Sonos app for my music. And I'm trying to think of what else I might have. I probably have a few more apps I use. My HVAC, I have a Daikin unit. And so I have their app. And I find that it is very nice because I'm very self-sufficient as a consumer. Like
Mm-hmm.
it works. It's pretty reliable and I feel pretty good. The version where I think it works really well with a centralized app control system, a Savant, a Crestron, a Control 4, an Elan, an RTI, whatever it is when you have a really good integrator that knows how to provide a great design and ongoing great service. And when
I think that's that's the key, right? Is the service component of it.
And
And I
that's where
think
it can break down. When you
yes,
aren't that integrator, then you've created, in many cases, a nightmare for the consumer.
yeah,
But when you are
yeah,
that person, magic happens.
yeah. Well, yes, and I also think listen, there's a dollar amount where it makes sense,
Yes.
and I've had this conversation with our friend Brian Mills, actively about, hey, Sonos with Lutron, and use the Sonos app and the Lutron app and do audio control amps and James small aperture speakers is a better experience for the customer. And I could see that argument. As I said, I think the in the projects that we're doing, they want the service, and I think it's the best service comes along with a single app solution. But we don't ever get to leave. That's true.
But
You're always involved.
but to your point, there's a level of customer that it's economics. It's economics partly. In other words, the project, the customer has to be in. I mean, this sounds bad. It has to be important enough to that business, that integration business, that it makes sense to sell them a solution and then ongoing provide that
Hmm.
service. And I think there's a break point at maybe willingness to invest in technology or ability to invest in technology, where there's businesses that just aren't designed or built or structured to provide that ongoing service, but yet the manufacturers do business with them and allow them to go into the marketplace and design and
Yeah,
install systems. And I think there's no other way to say it. In many cases, those businesses can leave a wake of destruction in their path. It's not everybody, and I'm not judging people by small, medium, or large. It has nothing to do with size of the business. You can be a person operation doing amazing work, loving and caring for your customers. And you can be a ginormous business and you can be leaving a wake of destruction. So it's not about size, it's about service mentality and thinking of that customer as a customer for life. I don't know.
yeah.
I'm ranting here, but does that jive with you, or what do you think about that?
I think it. No, I think it's true. I think Listen, I mean, every company has a bad project or two, or has done a bad job. But I think that to it's an interesting. You almost want to hold the manufacturers responsible for allowing people to sell their product who really shouldn't be selling their product. But I mean, I think you're right. I think that there is a certain customer, and maybe it's an age thing. I think listen, we were talking about this earlier pre-show about that music that was 30 years old in the 90s when we were in high school age. Now the stuff in the 90s is 30 years old today. It's like Pearl Jam is as old today as the Rolling Stones were when we were in high school. So it's a little crazy when you think about it. But I find myself less willing to deal with multiple apps and the frustrations that can come along with that stuff. So I think as you talk about a bit of an older demographic, um, and people that want to can afford and want to pay people to do things for them, they're willing to spend the money. So I think if they're willing to spend the money
Yeah.
and you can commit to the service level that you're kind of talking about, I think that you can provide a great experience. I mean, I do, as I think you need to pick your poison, and I think that's a great way to put it. You can't. I know that there are companies that do multiples, and they do it successfully. Certainly for us with 8 people doing multiple control systems, and I'm going to take the 2 lighting manufacturers and move them to the side. We're really talking about Savant, Crestron, and Control 4. I think you got to pick one, and you got to then, as I said earlier, conscious design around the control system and its faults, because they all have them. So I think being responsible design in that from that perspective, and then that commitment to service. I think then yes, and that's the right project. I mean, that's key.
Why do you think some integrators pick up multiple control systems? What are they trying to accomplish?
Oof. I've heard people describe themselves as the tech concierge or something along those lines. That kind of idea. Because there's this idea that if you're selling only one, that you're then biased on why the solution is right. I think that people view it as being genuine, as their offering being genuine. Well, if Crestron is right for this, we're going to put it in there. Or if Control 4 is right, we'll put that in. I don't think that's the case. I think that you cannot do them all well. and I know we talked about it a little bit earlier about people and the investment in your people, but how can mid-level technicians or even good technicians know how to troubleshoot all three systems effectively? So
There's a lot of similarities in you and that conversation. You as an integrator in the conversation around control systems, and me as a person running a marketing agency. And the similarity would be, for example, around software that websites are built with. And
mhm,
there's a lot of great software out there. There's WordPress, there's Joomla, there's Drupal, there's a whole litany of kind of smaller sandbox, simple builder website software, and they're almost all really good.
yeah,
And so when people come to us and say, "Well, can you build the website in WordPress?" No. But isn't
right,
WordPress is great software. It's just not the software we develop in. We develop in Joomla. And
mhm,
well, why do you develop in Joomla? Well, 'cause 10 years ago when we started on this road, we went all in on that and we said we're going to be really, really good at this. It doesn't diminish these other platforms. I just would rather be a focused expert than a generalist across lots of different software. And that
yeah,
sounds like a similar case that you're making. I clearly all the Savant plaques behind you, you're a Savant house, right? And
we
it's
are.
it's and you met it's there's good with Savant and there's challenges, but that goes with every single control system.
Yes, yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, many people listening probably know Matt Lavin from Metro 18, and one of their things is, you can have any kind of cake from us that you want as long as it's chocolate. They sell, and that's a thing. So for me, I know that I can't deliver the best experience and the best support and the best service if we start selling other control systems. And and that's from trial and error. We've been down this path, you know. So I think you pick your poison, and I think you roll with it. And assuming that the projects that you're involved with, can handle it, it's a good thing.
Jason Sayan on LinkedIn just posted, he said, selling in our industry has become a lost art. Too many companies don't qualify the customer or project, uh, I don't know how you say it, project properly and try to sell out of their own pocket or just want to give the client what they ask for. Versus if your client is saying, I want a Savant system, or I want a Lutron system, or I want a Crestron system, what that might be as a synonym is, I want an automation system. I want a lighting
Correct.
system. And I mean, what is that? Do you have clients that will come to you and ask for things? And do you interpret that as simply, I want this functionality? Or do you read it as, I want brand X, Y, or Z? And do they demand getting that particular brand?
I think there's only two brands at this point in this industry as a whole that generate that. One is Sonos and one is Lutron. People ask for those two things by name, and they mean those things by name. That doesn't mean, to Jason's point, that you can't sell them Savant as their streaming music solution, but you have to sell it to them. You have to, and some of that, you
Right.
know, I don't like it when people assume selling is a dirty word, right? It's not. It's qualifying the customer, understanding their needs, and presenting what you think is the best solution. And it may be better than what they thought they needed, right? And that's true. So I think very few people actually ask. But generally, I think when people say, I mean, for years it was, I hate those Crestron systems, right? This if you and they were talking about an automation system. They weren't talking about Crestron or AMX or Elan at the time. That very often they didn't know what they had. They just had something that they thought was a Crestron system, which was almost like Kleenex, for tissue back, I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago. So I think you have to qualify the customer, and that's key.
I want to switch gears here. I know that over the last several years, maybe you can talk to us about your journey. You've discovered areas of your business where you sought counsel outside of your business. And so and what does that mean? That means that you've brought in different types of consultant. Jason, who's commenting, is one of those consultants around process. But just can you maybe take us back in time? When did you realize that you wanted to get some other perspectives to help you understand your business and perhaps improve it?
So we probably by year. geez, year 4 through, I guess by year 4 or 5 of Elevated, we landed an MDU, following, the Concierge Direct model, um, in New York City, and it turned out to be the building, for a while. It was 443 Greenwich Street. We did a package for the developer, and then we, you know, pitched the idea of us selling upgrades and wiring during construction. And it was a grand slam of a project. It was the building. It was loaded with celebrities, and smallest apartment was 2,500 square feet for $7 million. And we did this project, which was like, again, shooting fish in a barrel. And when we were kind of at the back end of it, I was realizing that, well, this story of this project and the arc of the opportunities that should be coming from it are not, and there's a problem here.
Mm.
And I had to figure out what was the problem.
Why
At
am
the
I
end of the
not
day,
getting the referrals that I should be getting out of these
yeah.
happy customers?
And the problem at the end of the day, and this as a business owner, problem is me. It was my approach, and it was, the definition of insanity, which is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. So I rolled with this, from a, I kind of wrestled and whined about it in my own head for the better part of two or three more years, and kept cooking with the same ingredients and cooking it the same way and hoping that it would come out on the other side, not burned. And it burned, and it burned every single time. And it was September of 2020. So we're kind of out of the COVID lockdown in New York, by a bunch of months, busy as could be. And I just had one of those weeks, and I was like, I'm done. I cannot do this anymore. And
We've all been there.
realized
Every
that,
business owner listening is going, I feel you, man.
yep. And I realized that I was either going to have to go work for somebody and kind of just bring my clients and just go work for somebody and give up everything that I had built, or I had to come up with a way to solve my problem. So happened to be that, Chris Smith, who is somebody that, is an industry guy, who I knew through Ozione, had just gone out on his own as a business coach consultant. So I called him one day and I said, Chris, I need a process. And he says, okay. And that started the 9-month journey, most of which was not about process, and helping to change the way that I viewed my business. So anybody that owns their own business, you're emotional about it to some degree. But I had to stop making decisions emotionally and stop treating it as a hobbyist, and start making decisions that were right for the business. So he started with my team, and we went through a process. As I said, it was 9 months, where we talk, once a week for an hour, and he would do an hour of homework, and we would come up with initiatives and solve problems, and it led to a renaissance, ultimately for me. And then when I got to the point of saturation with Chris, and I think I described him to you. Chris is like, when you allow him to be, he's like forced evolution. And he introduced me to Jason, and I said, I asked him for a process, and I never got a process from Chris. And I said to Chris, what am I doing? I need a process now. We've done all this work. We've revised the team. We've changed this. We've done all these things. I need a process. He said to me, you have a process. I said, what? He goes, you have a process. You said to document it. And that's how I got to Jason. And Jason saying, allows you to regurgitate what you do, how you do it, with the pieces of software that you use. And all of a sudden it comes onto this map, and you have these directions that you can follow as a business. And I think I've described this before. It's like a cheat code. If we all played Contra as kids, up, down, left, right, BA, select, start, whatever it was, to get 100 lives, Jason's process map is like a cheat code. Every guy in your organization, every person in your organization levels up, because now all of a sudden there's accountability and people know what to do, right? So now we have a recipe for how we cook the food. And I don't think that journey would have been possible. I wouldn't have been able to get to Jason without Chris. And I think the combination for me was, business altering. I mean, life. I mean, at the end, it's life altering. I can't say enough good about how it makes you feel, how your business runs, the lower amounts of frustration. I mean, across the board, ultimately you're making more money because you're being more efficient. You're not
Yeah,
wasting energy.
I would imagine you're better for your family on the other side of that as well.
Yeah, I mean, and one of the things, I mean, 100%, it makes you available. And one of the things I think, and many people who are listening probably have heard me talk about it, led me to understand what the business needed from you run around till your hair's on fire, and then you decide you either need people or you need process, and what does that look like? And ultimately, going through this, going through kind of the evolution, and I think also, being part of industry groups like Ozione, Synergy is another one. I think that there's real value in there because you get to interact with people, and it's not always the usual suspects. Paul Bakker, who's commenting. Paul and I talk all the time. We're friends, but sometimes it's great to hear other perspectives from different businesses of different sizes and different markets. And I think it, ultimately led me to realize what I needed, and what I needed was a number two person. And all of the work from Chris and from Jason, I had built a person in my brain, and I knew who I wanted. And then when it was very clear, very easy when I met that person to hire them, and that's Olga, who many people have met. And that again just changes your life, changes your business life, changes your personal life when you have somebody good that you can rely on. It's a big deal. So I would never have gotten to Olga if not for Jason and not for Chris. So super, super valuable.
Curious, with Jason, and he's documented this process for you. How is that then institutionalized, or how do you then use that? You mentioned holding team members accountable. Like, what is that process like? The process of helping your team understand the process.
I think so. I presented it to them. We still, and it's a living document. I would want to say that it doesn't stop changing and evolving. And so we presented it to them and said, "Hey guys, check this out." And it was printed out on a 24 by 36 sheet of paper, and their eyes lit up, and we said, "So this is how we do this." And then it's on our internal Slack channels and our process, and we present it to all new employees. We present, this is how it operates, and what it did. And listen, I know there are a lot of business owners in this industry that many of them don't have active roles; they kind of just oversee. So I have very active roles, but it gave me accountability to them. They knew what I had to do in the different parts of the process. And I think the fact that they can look at that and know when things go wrong and why they go wrong, because listen, they still go wrong, but it helps they get less angry and they get less frustrated, and it's very easy to go, "Hey, I screwed up. I didn't do the thing that I was supposed to do." And I think the fact that they know that there's accountability across the board, makes it, is invaluable.
You mentioned the Olga effect, the idea that, Olga is, your right-hand person. What is that job title? Like, what is and how do you decide what gets delegated to her, maybe that previously you would carry in terms of responsibilities?
I think so. She's our director of operations,
Okay.
and one of the things that I had to learn when listening to somebody like Chris talk about your purchasing department. Everybody goes, "Well, I don't have a purchasing department." Well, no, but when you purchase, you're wearing the purchasing department hat, right? So it was, and again, as part of that process map, understanding what things went in what buckets, so to speak, and then assigning either the bucket or parts of the bucket to individual people. So for Olga, it was really, it was whatever it took to some degree to allow me to do the things that that I'm good at a high level. So highest and best use, right? What is my highest and best use? And it wasn't doing POs, or it wasn't scheduling the guys, or it wasn't dealing with feedback and reorganization of process, that sort of thing. I mean, I had to sell. That's what I have to do. So it was initially, and not many people, we didn't talk about this, but I've worked from home forever. We have a couple of warehouses. We've been remote, for long before COVID. I had an office when we first started, and it was
You're at your
invented.
home office now. Is that where I'm
I'm
saying?
my home. Yep.
Okay.
So I had to ultimately, when Olga accepted the job, I had to make a conscious decision to move her into my office. So to my left is, or your right, my left, that side is another desk. And that is where I committed. I said, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this right. And she spent tons and tons of time here, and she's here a couple of days a week and immersive, as it relates to her onboarding and the commitment to her onboarding. And we have found that we've adjusted the way we've approached things and do different things at different times, and we've changed it. And I think it'll continue to evolve. But I think being committed to onboarding her in a way to make her successful was a part of it. As I said, I mean, she comes to literally sits to my left and yells at me all day long, which is okay.
Ah, that's hilarious. I'll just share that to keep it high level. I had a similar epiphany in my business, adding an operations person, and in my business, also realizing my best and most effective superpower to contribute to the business was sales. And meanwhile, prior to that, I had been trying and failing to hire
Mm-hmm.
salespeople. And my epiphany was, well, Ron, what the heck are you doing?
You too,
Like,
right?
you can go out
It's
and
true.
you need to keep the fish that you catch, and you need to make them very happy so they stay with you for a long time and tell their friends about you. And
Yep.
that is the key. And so I feel you, man. It what now seems in hindsight obvious. You want to
Right.
look at all those years you struggled and go, "Ugh, why didn't I see it earlier?"
It's truth. I mean, it's interesting. As I said, I don't. I think you have to be willing to. It's very difficult to be willing to admit to yourself, even to some degree, that you are wrong or the way you're doing it is wrong, and that I was the biggest problem. You
Mhm.
know, but as I get angry phone calls or text messages from techs who go, "I don't have what I need," I'm like, "Oops," because I didn't order it. Well, that doesn't happen anymore. That doesn't happen. And I think that it's the willingness to change, the willingness to kind of really be look inside of the business, and not be offended by the thought. Right? There's this kind of, it was interesting. I had to figure out how to not be offended by Chris all the time
Mhm.
as we talk through things. And I see that, I see it even now with Olga. I have to, listen. She's going to have differences of opinion. We're not always lockstep about everything, but I listen, I hear it out, I realize that there are places where I'm going to stand my ground, and there are places I'm just going to let her run with it because she's got a better idea. Um, so it's also, it's interesting, the idea to relinquish some control.
I mean, to learn to delegate. I mean, you've heard delegate and to elevate,
Hmm.
but that's easier said than done, especially when you've been operating a different way for so long.
Yeah,
Do you think you're
100%.
getting better at delegating?
Yeah, yes. I mean, I think as I said, you have to try not to take everything so personally. So I think yes. I think generally, and I think that there are places you can give away more. I think as you, with all these things that we're talking about, at the end of the day, the net result is my people are getting better at their jobs. So how do those guys now be able to take additional pieces that flow down, hill, so to speak? So some of the stuff that Olga can do can maybe go on somebody else's plate, and then it continues, right?
S-
So
Something prior to us going live, you mentioned that is a current focus of yours is company culture. Could you kind of speak to that and how you're thinking about that or working on that?
yeah, I think part of the Ozione experience is now doing these kind of more development stuff, right? So they're looking into, how do we develop companies beyond just selling? How do we help to invest in more in the insides? And so and Jason and Chris are doing some of that with Ozione, and the third person that they have is Stacy McKibben. And Stacy is, she's a business coach, consultant, and when they call them connected clusters cube started in with Ozione, I jumped at the chance to work with Stacy because I said, hey, I've already spent a lot of time with Jason and with Chris. I want to look at the next thing, and people take away different things, right? You'll get something different from a coach than I'll get, but what I'm getting from her is how to continue to develop the culture of the company. Both from an employee development perspective, from a positive culture perspective. One of the things we talked about earlier was how powerful it is to have women in our industry, which is so male dominated, and just the difference in having a woman as part of Elevated has been really significant. So I spend a lot of time thinking about culture, thinking about what makes my people happy. Why are they happy? Why aren't they happy? Because at the end of the day, I believe that if you have happy employees, you're going to have productive employees. So I think, and productive employees mean happy customers and a good bottom line, because that is all. That's why we're here. So I take a lot of my conversation and time spent talking to Stacy, into the culture side of the business. And I think that's another just great aspect of Ozzione, and then also Synergy, which is a bit of a different approach on that. It's just all about professional development, and utilizing the opportunities we have in the industry, and then these different organizations that are here to help. As I think we said it before, is it as a small business owner, are you struggling with the same thing that somebody else is struggling with? Well, yeah. Well, how did you solve it? I don't know. How did I solve it? How did they solve it? So I think that perspective is really important. I think that's what a lot of these groups are doing now, is providing the ability to have perspective.
That's when we go to conference or industry trade shows or events or conferences, I'll often talk to people and they're like, yeah, I'm too busy. I don't have time to go. And if you only look at a conference with the programming, it may or may not seem like it's your highest or best use of your time. But when you look
Yeah.
at the sharing with your peers, and sometimes it's when you're sitting at the bar at the end of the day and you're having that conversation with the person to your right or left, that some of the biggest epiphanies or discoveries happen.
I think it's a fact. I think it's a fact. I mean, I think there's some of the best conversations I've had, and I'm lucky enough to have a relationship with Bob Madonna, who's the owner of Savant, and some of the best conversations that I've had with him have been after the event, and that sort of thing. And I think that those times are valuable. I mean, that's where relationships are built, right? You don't build it sitting at a table. You maybe get introduced to people or to somebody, but the relationships are kind of forged and built after the fact. And I think that it's one of the reasons you do this stuff, do these events. I mean, listen, we wouldn't, we have a good relationship and chat all the time, and we wouldn't know each other if not for Ozzione and that sort of thing. Even as somebody that uses some of your services, we wouldn't necessarily know each other like we do. And I think that's a really
Right.
cool thing.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. You mentioned culture is a focus. You're working with Stacy. That's kind of the area you're directing some of the energy in that interaction or that consulting relationship. One takeaway that you could share with our audience, maybe something that you now do differently or think of differently as it relates to building a strong culture that, you think might be valuable, if you were sitting beside someone in our audience at a bar, at a conference, and you're like, hey, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. Anything that comes to
I
mind?
would say, yeah, I think the biggest thing is reinvesting in your people. I think that's been my big, is to continually educate and continually invest in them. Whether it be training, whether it be, um, you know, um, spending time with them. And it's always, that's a tricky thing, right? People go to work, they don't want to spend time with their employees or their boss, so to speak. But taking a genuine interest, kind of slowing down a little bit with my interactions with them. Um, and I think that investment of time, I think, is a thing from my perspective. I look at that, I say, hey, let me have a conversation. Let me go to that job site and spend a couple hours with them. I think I think that can be really valuable. And I also think on the education side, and I think they view it as genuine. And I think that that's another thing. You develop people versus buy people, so to speak, right? You're just going out and hiring the most expensive guy. It's like pro sports. Steve Cohen at the Mets is going to spend $350 million on his payroll this year, but you can also develop those people, but you have to invest in them, and the investment is the time. Both from an interpersonal relationship perspective, but also training and being willing to let them spend the time to do that. I think that's kind of where we're looking most right now.
You've been at this business thing now for a couple decades. Do you feel that you're getting better at it?
Yeah, I mean, you can't. There's no replacement for experience. So, but I think to some degree, I think there's just so much more to learn. I mean, without sounding soupy about it, I think you have to be you have to be willing to continue to invest in getting better at what you do.
Yeah.
So, I think we're successful. I think that the company is doing really well. We've had our biggest quarter ever.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And that it's a good feeling going into what could be a little dicey next year. Um, but again, I think a lot
Perfect
of that is
transition,
because we're
by the way. That's
focused.
what I want to talk about next, is kind of get your thoughts on next year. But continue that thought. Sorry for interrupting.
Yeah, no, I just no. I think it's I think that these are results of all this journey of the last 2 or so years for me, two plus years, in kind of reinventing how we did things and who we are as a company. And I don't want to say like our branding, so to speak, never changed. We're still kind of the same. Our approach and our high level 20,000 foot view of how we want to do business and do integration um, is the same. It's just how we get there now is very different. I think yeah, listen, I think it's continual. It's continual. I think when you stop changing, then you become, irrelevant.
Do you feel that the work you've invested, it's not only cost money, but it's cost time and energy, the last couple of years, this work you've put into the business? Do you feel today, December 28th, 2022, that you're better positioned to, rock out for another 10 years, 20 years, 5 years, however long your horizon is for your business? Do you feel you're better positioned today than you were on that September day, 2020, before you began?
100%. I think. I mean, we would have been gone in 6 months. I think, and not necessarily because we didn't have work, but because we were so frustrated. You wouldn't want to invest the time anymore. So I think we are 100%. And as I said, I think all of these little things add up to efficiency and add up to profitability. Um, and I think that is how you getting the most out of our team, by being as efficient as we can be, and continually developing and growing your team. I think allows you to be positioned in it as safely as possible when things get weird. And I don't know, I'm not convinced that we're on some collapse. I mean, there is I don't see anything in the middle. There's no middle project. It's either small, like a small upgrade, or small
What's a
service, or
small
something along those
project by
lines.
your definition? What's a, if you put a dollar value, and this isn't judgmental, but I'll just give an example. I spoke to someone in the Florida Keys this morning, and this person said that they are and in their example, and this is for other reasons than economic reasons, they're no longer doing the $25,000 project. They're now doing the $2,500 project. And that was just in their universe. That was what big and little meant. And so everyone listening, your big, medium, and large is going to be different. So I'm
Yes.
curious, your definition. I'm going to make a guess. Your big is probably 500,000 plus, probably 500K up, or is it 250, or where would you draw that line to call something
Yeah,
big?
I think it's north of 300. I think it depends, right? So a $250,000 theater is a big project. A 20,000 square foot home of lighting, shades, and audio at 250 is not really a big. I mean, it's so. But for us, it's about 250 and up. We consider that a large project.
Okay.
We're seeing multiples in the north of 500 area, and then the lower end is, I would call it sub 50,000 for us. And we'll do small jobs. I mean, we'll go out and do a $10 or $15,000 network upgrade. That's just the world that we're in. But I'm seeing nothing like, generally 75 to 200. There's nothing.
Why do you think that is?
Zilch. So I think the people that are truly wealthy still have money. And I think the guy that's spending $500,000 on a project, whatever that encompasses, maybe he'll spend 450. That's how he dials it back. I think the people that are developing their wealth, maybe it's the younger finance guy, maybe it's I don't know, maybe it's a small business owner, who's got some money. I think those are the people that are not spending, at least in our world. That's not what we're seeing. And then I'm seeing people, I think the people that are more conservative, are prepared to spend 20 or 30 or 40,000 bucks. Maybe that person would spend 100,000 if it was the economy was great for them.
What pivot have you made in your business due to this observed change in projects?
Yeah, I think so. One thing we've focused really heavily on how we're interacting with those large project groups, right? So whether it's family offices, architects, designers, contractors, property managers, whatever it is, we're trying to be all over it, all over it, even at a higher level than we normally would be, because I think that's where the additional future opportunity will come more easily.
Mhm.
And then, generally to be really efficient, right? I mean, it is all for me about being efficient, the least amount of wasted energy. Stacy brought a book up to a group of us at Osneum called Essentialism, which is really about, at the end of the day, it's about what you choose to spend your time on, and time spending any time or anything on anything is wasted energy if it's not key, right? So if you have a priority list and it's got more than about 2 or 3 items on it, it's no longer a priority list because there's no priorities. So um, it's about being efficient. It's organizational efficiency, job efficiency, you're minimizing your costs, maximizing your output, and really focusing on things that give you the biggest return, on your investment, whether that be time or money.
Awesome. Nick, we're for our audience, we're going to drop into the show notes the links. You mentioned Chris Smith and his company, Jason, Sayon, and Stacy. We're gonna drop all those links to their website so that if any of our listeners or people watching live want to find those people. If anyone wants to get in touch with you, sir, how would you advise they do that?
Yeah, Nick at elevatedintegration.com. You can also connect through our website, which is elevatedintegration.com. I'm all over Slack, trolling Paul Bakker usually. So you can find us there, Ozzy Slack or Synergy Slack channels. Yeah.
Awesome. Nick, thank you, sir, for being our guest on show 233 of Automation Unplugged, man. I'm proud of you for all the work you've put into your business over the last couple of years. That's hard stuff. And but if you do it and you do it right and you stay dedicated, there's fruit on the other side of that investment. And
Definitely is.
and you're living proof of that. So happy holidays, my friend. And again, I
You
appreciate you
too.
coming on the show.
Good to be on. Thanks, Ron.
Awesome. All right, folks, there you have it. Show 233. One of the takeaways that Nick mentioned in terms of culture was spending time with his team. And it was, I didn't want to add it while we were in the live interview, but to take away from his point, but I completely agree. Actually, it was one of my additions to my process and methodology here at One Firefly in 2022, actually starting last January. I started doing one-on-ones weekly, rotating through my entire team, every role, every position. And I can tell you it's some of the meetings I look forward to most. And that is just hearing from my teammates and hearing what are they seeing, what's working, what's not working in the personal and professional, and frankly, just touching base in our role as leaders, founders, operators of our business. We don't always get to work with every member of our team every day. And particularly as we continue to grow and scale, which we're doing here at One Firefly, there were people, if I didn't have that time on the calendar, I wouldn't likely otherwise be able to spend time with them. But now that we do that, I feel I'm more connected to my organization than ever. And there are just so many brilliant ideas that bubble up through those interactions that we've been able to, in fact, implement here. So I thought that was pretty neat. That Nick's point, I was totally jiving with that. I think that was one of the biggest things we did here at One Firefly. And we will not have a show next week. By the way, I'm going to be in my annual planning with my leadership team. And the key to a successful year is to plan a successful year. And so there's been a lot of pre-planning that's going on with my team, and we're actually all going to circle up next week and kind of put pen to paper and get that documented. So I will be away next week and no show, but we'll be back in action the week thereafter. So definitely join us. And on that note, I appreciate all of you. If you have not already done so, go to your favorite podcasting app and follow the show, like and subscribe. And that way, if you even want to go out of your way and make a review, hopefully you like the show. And even if you don't like the show, if you leave reviews, that'll be a way that we can get your feedback and improve. And so definitely please do that. So on that note, I'm going to sign off, wishing you all a wonderful New Year celebration that's coming here at the end of this week. And I'll see you on Automation Unplugged in the new year, 2023. Thanks, all of you.